Hello, welcome everyone. This is going to be third or fourth video, I don't remember already, but I am going to read a story of William Corbridge, who is my third great grandfather. Yes, this was put together in 2012. I put my book together this last year and kind of compiled a bunch of my family history stories into a book. So I guess before I start, I'm just going to give a little background on why I got so interested in family history. So we were living in North Idaho, and it was back when we were doing 3-hour church, and we went to the gospel doctrine class, and I was completely unedified and kind of done with that class because one of the people was not teaching doctrine. He was teaching some false doctrine. So I decided I wasn't going to go anymore. But instead of going to the gospel doctrine class, me and my wife decided to go to the family history class that they were doing. And that was one of the best decisions we ever made. It was amazing. We learned so much. We started actually finding names. We started learning how to use family search, and it was a good experience. Well, fast forward, William Corbridge. I'd never really heard of him. I've seen his name on Family Search. I've known who he was, but I didn't really know who he was until about 2 years ago when I started preparing to go to Nauvoo. We were really planning on going to Nauvoo and I wanted to research and learn all about any ancestor that I had that might have been there, and so I came across this story of my third great grandfather. So I'll start, and this one's a little bit shorter, so it shouldn't be near as long as the other one that I made the other day. William Corbridge was born on July 23rd, 1837 in Lancashire, England, to James Corbridge and Elizabeth Walmsley Corbridge. He immigrated to America with his family in the year 1840 and were among the first group of Mormons to leave England. There were 3 children in the family: Mary Ann, who was 5 years old, William, 3 years old, and James, 1 year old. While crossing the water, James Jr. died and was buried in the ocean. The rest of the family came on to Nauvoo, and as they were very poor and food being scarce, they had to live on cornbread. Here it was that James Corbridge and his son William took ill with cholera and were very sick. The prophet Joseph Smith administered to them both and promised William a long life, but not his father. The promise came true as the father James died and William recovered after about 2 years, but he could not remember much about the prophet or his own father. He only remembered that there were such persons. I just want to stop here. So when we went to Nauvoo about a year and a half ago, we know James was buried in Nauvoo, and we don't know exactly where, but in his records it says that he's buried in Nauvoo. We think it was in the old Pioneer Cemetery, and we went and looked to see if we could find where he was buried while we were there. We couldn't find it. A lot of the graves there are not marked very well, and they are not. A lot of them hadn't been taken care of until pretty recently. Some of them have come back and put new headstones on. His is not one of them, but we enjoyed that. We enjoyed looking for his burial place, and it's become kind of a tradition now to go find places where our ancestors are buried when we're traveling there. William's mother, Elizabeth, then had to make a living for her and her two children by taking in the washings of the prophet Joseph Smith's family. She later married John Walker, and after having two children, Solomon and Hiram, the marriage did not last as John Walker took another wife and came to Utah, leaving Elizabeth and his children in Nauvoo. William's sister, Mary Ann, came to Utah with Bishop Hunter's company. The next year, 1852, William came with his mother and her three children as far as winter quarters. William, being the oldest boy, helped his mother as much as possible, and at the same time worked for 25 cents a day driving cattle. Thus he walked the entire distance across the plains. They traveled with the Fuller Company, which averaged 10 miles a day. William bought a calf for $5, and later when they moved to Tooele, he took the calf with him. They lived in Tooele for 2 years. His youngest brother, Hiram, was 1 year old at the time of their arrival. In 1853, Elizabeth married George Marshall, and to this union 2 children were born, named George and Ephraim. This marriage did not last, and again his parents separated. William stayed with his mother, and they endured many hardships together. In 1856, William was called to Fort Bridger, Wyoming, to aid in the rescue of the immigrants in the Willie and Martin handcart companies, who had started the journey across the plains late in the season and were caught in the early snows. William was just 16 years of age. A big snow fell that year, and the church sent strong men, supplies, and wagons to bring the immigrants on to Utah and save their lives. Now, she says here he was only 16, but he looks like, according to when he was born, he was actually closer to 19. A big snow fell that year, and the church sent strong men, supplies, and wagons to bring the immigrants onto Utah and save their lives. They had to shovel snow to clear the way, and they arrived at the Weber Creek just about sundown. It was bitter cold, and many of them got their feet frozen, including Captain Lee of the company. William said it was the coldest winter he had ever known. He wore his shoes out kicking the wagon wheels to keep his feet from freezing, while they made a fire to warm them. Many died with the cold. The horses were so covered with frost that it was difficult to tell their colors. Some of the company went across the creek that night as the ice froze on the horses while crossing, and the drivers could hardly keep the horses from running into the fires. The rest of the rescue company did not cross until morning, when they could drive over the ice without breaking it. 2 days later, they were overjoyed when they reached the suffering saints. William witnessed the death of many in the handcart company when they arrived at their camp. They then escorted the immigrants to the Salt Lake Valley. In all the time he was gone, William only missed 1 day of driving the team that belonged to George Marshall, Sr., William's sister. Mary Ann Corbridge Hamblin married Oscar Hamblin in 1854. His family moved to Santa Clara, Utah in the autumn of 1855 with Jacob Hamblin, the Indian agent and interpreter, and his family. Mary Ann was the first white woman of the saints to live among the Indians. The Indians admired Mary Ann. She was good to them, and they loved her. Elizabeth Walmsley moved her family to Santa Clara at this time with Mary Ann and Oscar. A story is often related of when William went to see Mary Ann's brother, who was a distant neighbor of the Hamblins. While on his way to pay them a visit, William was surrounded by hostile Indians. They went into the war dance and were preparing to scalp him. He begged and implored them to spare his life. However, not until he told them he was Mary Ann's brother did they turn him loose. The respect and love they felt for Mary Ann was responsible for saving his scalp and probably his life. William married Eliza Jane Zabriskie in December 1868. To this union, 8 children were born. Eliza Jane died February 1884, and William was left to take care of the children and farm in Minersville, Utah. Now she's my third great grandma, so she's who I'm descended from. Let's see. He was told of a young Mormon woman in England who wanted to come to work for passage here. She was recommended to him, so he sent for her. Hannah Alice Cornford came and soon became his wife in November 1889.